to the SAB statement that it will go ahead, that it's done all the consultations, that it's now time?
Look, there seems to be a very backward and destructive economic consensus in this country, right? By those who own South Africa and those who are tasked with managing its affairs, that retrenchments and privatization and all those sorts of manner of things that surrender our sovereignty, selling off and destroying our SOEs, are a method of fiscal sustainability, prosperity, and building our economy. And I give you this context, Francis, because that's exactly what seems to be plaguing the SABC, that there is a very ignorant and narrow-minded view that retrenchments will build the SABC's financial stability and future prospects. It's simply not true. Retrenchments do not constitute revenue streams. It is an irresponsible act that just seeks to collapse the SABC and further take it down the route that all of the rest of the SOEs in this country are going to. It's very irresponsible in the very fact that the SABC is a national broadcaster that is accessible to a majority of homes in this country. It has been performing very well in terms of news coverage and local content produced. And the simple problem has been that there's not been any strategic leadership at the SABC. There's not been anyone to take advantage of the content produced by the SABC and the profits it's making. Yeah. And the workers are bearing the brunt of this ignorant leadership.
If the SABC is right, though, in what it said earlier, that there are some people in positions with simply nothing to do, and we've seen that taxpayers have to sometimes get involved with the SABC, although it's a very small portion, actually, of government revenue that's involved. But if there are people with nothing to do, do you just leave that situation, even though it may affect the country, the taxpayers?
That is simply implausible. You can't exist within an entity. You can't go to work at 9 in the morning, Francis, and tell me you're sitting there in front of your laptop and you have no task at the biggest national broadcaster in Southern Africa. It can't be true. There's so much content that the SABC has to produce. There's so much people, local people from our communities who submit their documentaries, submit their proposals for TV drama shows, who submit a majority of things to the SABC in order for it to do its work. So it cannot be that there's anyone within the entity that doesn't have anything to do. That's simply a very lazy excuse. And in fact, the SABC must be able to furnish us with these employees' names who are sitting at their laptops and have been paid for months on end. And those who have maintained their employment are the ones who must lose their jobs. Because who's providing oversight in the entity in itself that has allowed someone to sit on their laptop and do nothing for months on end and now wants to retrench a majority of workers because of such a responsibility?
It has presented a plan saying that some jobs are redundant, so that would mean that they're not needed. Are you saying there can be no redundant jobs in the SABC right now, no matter how many people have been hired in the past, no matter how their skills match their jobs, there can be no redundancy?
I'm saying, Francis, anyone with the creative and economic capacity and the imagination at the SABC will understand that there's so much room for expansion within the national broadcaster. Currently, the broadcasting and creative market is dominated by pay-to-view, pay-to-watch entities such as MultiChoice, which are dominating in terms of content creation and news coverage. The SABC, the national broadcaster, must be able to compete at the same level as those entities. And to do that, it must expand. And the retrenchment of staff can't be a solution to that. I mean, there has to be, with these workers who are at the SABC, people who have the capacity to expand its creative development and its economic prospects.
Mr. Tambo, we're running out of time. May I ask you, what is the EFF going to do about this? Staff members are getting ready to receive letters as early as next week.
We will be petitioning that with the Public Protector firstly, and we'll also be writing to the committee and the Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies to cease and desist this process of retrenchment on the basis that it's the strategic leadership that is lacking at the SABC to take it forward, and that there's a lot of investments and export of locally produced content that could keep the SABC afloat, and not retrenchment as an economic model for sustainability.
All right, thank you for your time tonight. That was the EFF's Sinawo Tambo, Head of Presidency and a Member of Parliament. All right, and Tshepiso, you'll be chatting to the South African Communist Party as well. A lot of political reaction to what's happening, I guess because of the public mandate of the SABC.
And they have said in the past that they stand in solidarity with workers, that they really don't agree with the SABC's plan to retrench, saying that there are other ways that can be found to work around the situation. And hopefully we'll be speaking to the national spokesperson Alex Mashilo. I believe he is on the line with us. Mr. Mashilo, very good evening, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So SABC has laid out its plans. You have in the past rebuked the decision, as I mentioned. So do you believe that they have been transparent about this entire process, the cost structure, including the impact of outsourcing, out-contracting contracts, tenders, tenderization, for public scrutiny?
It is very difficult to conclude that there has been transparency. The reason is that what the public knows is that the SABC was having a Labor Relations Act Section 189 consultation with trade unions at the SABC. Now, Section 189 of the Labor Relations Act is consultation for dismissal of workers based on the employer's operational requirements. It is governed in terms of that piece of law. It is divided into two sections. One section governs a low number of dismissal, while another section covers mass dismissal. Now, we saw a correspondence that reached us from one of the unions involved in the consultation process yesterday. That correspondence, clause 6 of the SABC correspondence, says that 97 positions will be available to the employees who wish to apply for those positions in terms of Section 197 of the Labor Relations Act. Hang on a little bit. Section 197 of the Labor Relations Act governs the transfer of the whole or a part of a business from one employer in terms of the act, that is the old employer, to the new employer. Now, that is privatization. What that means is that there is a section of the SABC business or operation that is being conveyed to a private company. And the promise that the SABC gives to the workers is that alternative employment will be made available with the transfer of that part of the business in terms of the law as a going concern.
And I'm glad you say
that
available, Mr. Mashilo.
Completely a different matter.
And I want you to also talk about the 170 jobs which SABC said will be available for employees to apply for. What is your understanding of that? And does it guarantee that those within the system as an employees will be given first preference?
Just before we deal with that, it is important we communicate this message to the public, because it was not communicated to the public. That one of the reasons why the SABC is retrenching the workers is that it is transferring a part of its operation to a private company in terms of Section 197 of the Labor Relations Act. One thing happened at the SABC in the past. There was recklessness and accusations of state capture, that people who were managing the SABC were appointing contracts in ways that they would benefit. This notice that we saw from the SABC yesterday requires scrutiny. We need to know which company is this one that the new managers of the SABC are transferring a part of this public broadcasting mandate operation to, and why are they doing so? That is crucial, because the SABC is a public broadcaster. We need to know why this part is no longer an essential part of public broadcasting mandate, because we have to defend that. Now, coming to the question that you just raised now, about the 197 jobs that they say they cut. Clearly, there was progress from the negotiations with the union, because the original figure that the SABC advanced is that they wanted to retrench 600 workers. That number has come down to a figure of workers in the region of 200 and something. However, clearly, more work can be done to reduce that further and to develop alternatives. And we are talking about this in the era of the digital industrial revolution, where organizations like the SABC can actually expand to be active in other areas of broadcasting using new technologies, where there are companies from overseas occupying the market and in which niche there is no public broadcasting presence.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your insights. The SACP's national spokesperson. Thank you very much for speaking to us, Alex Mashilo. Moving on to some international news. Reaction now to the